Made a whole bunch of little projects here today, and I'll show them to you in a minute. Some are pretty cool, some are a little lame or don't even need a video on their own, but in any case, we'll get to that in a moment. First, tell me if this sounds familiar. You're a DM who likes to use miniature terrain to enhance the experience of yourself and your players. You are also a completionist who feels that the modeled terrain needs to render the fiction completely. Subbing in like a Jenga block or a milk cart for something that you don't have breaks the immersion. It's an eyesore, and it's like 95% there, might as well be 0%. So then you think to yourself, well, I'm gonna push off and maybe take this evening's content, postpone it to a later date, come up with some other story element to fill in tonight, or I just won't use terrain, or I'll reschedule tonight's session altogether, and then it death spirals from there. Before you know it, what's supposed to be a fun sub-hobby of your hobby is causing anxiety. Well, what's supposed to mitigate this is collections, right? This is why you have a collection. Big stockpile of default assets that can cover most situations. That's not particularly insightful. Thing is, I asked myself, what am I missing? What are the stock things you would expect to see in like a D&D terrain collection that I don't have? For example, somehow I've gone years without coffins or sarcophagi. How often do we go into ancient tombs and graveyards in a D&D adventure? And somehow I never made any. So stuff like that. And I end up making a whole bunch of little projects here to sort of fill out my collection. So let's go to the workbench and see what am I missing. And remember, for all you 3D printers out there, you must check out Heroes Horde, home of tons of affordable models, including the original True Tiles. What say we begin with a nice, simple well? Because I'm going for a new unified look for all of my stone in all of my terrain, I'm sticking with XPS foam. I ripped down centimeter-wide sticks and then chopped them with a slight angle so that when they're glued onto a circle base, they fit nicely. This isn't worth measuring, I just eyeballed it. For the skeleton of the roof, I'm just using Graphics Medium chipboard. This is the thick cardstock you'll find at the back of a legal pad, but you can buy it in bulk like I do if you want. There's links in the description below. Anyway, I hot glue these together while holding them at an angle. Then it's 2 lengths of square wooden dowel, balsa or pine, whatever the craft store has, and a circular dowel connecting the two. As always, I like to use superglue and superglue accelerant because it's insta-cure, won't reactivate with the moisture of paint, and really is quite strong. Shingles are the usual formula: cereal box ripped into strips and then cut 2/3 of the way through at random intervals. Here is some crafting twine. I superglued it off-center on that center dowel and began wrapping it around. We'll imagine that the bucket is currently submerged, so the rope goes down and touches the pure black of the inside base. And as a last touch, here's a paper clip. I'll strip the vinyl off of it and bend it into the shape of a crank. Well, I'm really happy with this little thing. It looks pretty realistic. Something about this one was fun. It only took about 2 hours to make. Not shown, but I took some gloss varnish and dumped about a 1/16 of an inch in there and just gave it overnight to dry and cure. For the wood coffins, I cut the general shape out of Graphics Medium chipboard, then ripped 1/2-inch strips and chopped the lengths I needed to trace the outside. I affixed all of this with hot glue and put a heavy glass gem in the center, the kind you would put in a floral vase. Weightier terrain pieces aren't necessarily more durable, but they do feel better to use. And for the lids, I went to this mega jumbo popsicle stick pack, which is kind of getting low. I've been using these a lot lately. But they cut nicely with a utility knife or box cutter, whatever you're using. Just do many light passes and the razor of the knife will cut through cleanly. Again, many light passes. This will prevent splintering. Notice that the paper side of cereal box can be painted and dry brushed to pass as wood. Your eye really doesn't notice it because the lid is actual wood and draws all of your attention. The stone coffins also began as Graphics Medium chipboard, just glued into a rectangle, then a strip of cereal box wrapped around that. And the lid is a slightly oversized rectangle with a smaller one inside of that to give it a tiered look. You'll see what I mean. I also bought this pack of filigreed, I guess they're beads? I don't know. They're in my recommended products below, but with some wire cutters, they can be snipped. So I extracted some gothic shapes here and attached them to the coffin with superglue. Again, I attached some weight on the inside. Actually, 2 of those glass beads fit, so these are real heavy. and painted the coffin with the exact same stone recipe that I've been using. A dry brush with white, an airbrush of sepia, a dry brush with khaki, and finishing with an oil wash of black-brown. Sometimes I worry that the stone painting recipe I settled on has too many steps. Like, couldn't you go straight from black to dry brush and then wash? But the undertones really do matter, especially when there's flat surfaces like these. Sometimes in a tavern of ill repute, there may be some recreational chemistry going on. So here's a grungy little table I made many videos ago. And I'm going to hand tear a few bits of plain white printer paper, then douse them with a wash and attach them to the table with white glue. Then another little dab of white glue and attaching some foam flocking. There we go, a little bit of the halfling leaf, as they say. Just to clarify for all you kids that are watching, these are Caesar salads. Taverns don't necessarily have to serve just goat leg and mead. I love my new chonky magna tiles. They look great, they feel great, but the geometry is a little boring, so I made some of these quarter circles. Construction techniques were all the same, but I attached the foam squares to the top and then used the tile itself as a jig for the wire to run against. So these make for a good far side of a special room, and I'm sure I'll make other special geometries as I need them to fill out my collection in future sessions. I needed a wine rack for an upcoming scenario, and so I went to my electrical supplies box and found resistor packs that I don't ever use, like 10,000 and a million ohms. I'll never use these with the tiny circuits I build, but they are close enough to being the perfect shape. It's a small cylinder, a pill shape, but it's kind of bulbous at both ends, so I chopped one side flat and left the rest of it inserted in that tape roll. Reason being, I'm going to airbrush these. It is way too finicky to try and brush, so I'm going to use the airbrush, and I affixed them to some cardboard first to make it easier to handle, then blasted with some primer. As always, I am using my Army Painter Warpaints Fanatic line. They are a friend of the channel, and they make the best miniature paints on the planet. One of them is even called Moldy Wine. So I did about a third of them, each in different colors, not caring about overspray. That would just give me an extra mixed color in the middle. I also finished with a gloss varnish. Easy enough. What was not so easy was the rack itself. I'm using an oversized popsicle stick or tongue depressor as the base, and from there it was just finicky assembly using matchsticks and picks, and getting all that super glued together without it moving around. As you can see, upside down painter's tape makes a great temporary fixment. Anyway, once that was all stained up, I attached the wine bottles with little dabs of white glue, and it's done. Voila, wine rack. This is bar none my favorite of this video's little collection of projects, and maybe one of my personal favorite top 10 little features ever. For a portcullis, my initial idea was these party toothpicks that have the 4 playing card symbols on them. The ones with the spades could make good-looking pulls. However, the stick part is not round and it's also not square, so it was hard to get these oriented correctly. And they're so lightweight that there just wasn't much surface area to attach to the upside-down tape. They just ended up being a pain. I gave up and went to toothpicks. So toothpicks taped in place and then some cardstock used as the cross members. Now I wasn't thinking and I chopped off the flat sides to make this door 2 inches tall before I realized, oh, those spikes would be perfect for mounting into the foam of the archway later on. Anyway, I realized it just in time and had one left. So that's a simple matter of painting with gunmetal and then washing with some kind of brown of your choice. Portcullis. Not fancy, doesn't need to be. I also felt like playing around with my gothic beads and making some kind of steel or arcane door. I was turned on to these particular collections by Dan Does, a fellow tabletop gaming scratch building YouTuber. He has an excellent eye for how to use these, and I've studied a few of his videos to come up with this door actually. And it still doesn't tie together exactly right. It's got some mixed motifs in it, but whatever. Now I have a token special door to lay down if I ever need to, like for the boss's final lair or something. Pillars. For my new tile set, I need some matching pillars. Now these were originally for my Dwarven architecture video that I did a couple months ago, but halfway through it I decided to impose a no foam rule on myself for that video, so these went on the shelf unfinished. I saw them lying there the other day and was like, oh, aesthetically, those match my new tile set perfectly. So I glued them up, finished them, and painted them with the same recipe. Nothing particularly novel here. They do feel nice and heavy. They're hard to tip over because I've set several drywall screws through their center. So they're nice and bottom and center heavy. Looking at these is another example of how important the undertones are. I also need a good fountain. I made one for my previous dungeon set, but it matches that one's motif. So I'm pretty much going to remake it in exactly the same way. I even have one of those fake champagne flute bottoms from the Dollar Tree. And the main pool is made much like the well was, just a single layer of stones high this time. I also sort of teased hot glue upwards on the inside to cover all the cracks, because I'm going to be doing a resin pour later on. But everything, once again, gets painted with the exact same stone recipe. And then I tried to figure out how to make the flowing water down from the fountain into the pool. At first I tried some clear plastic. This proved extremely difficult to work with and ultimately would have completely hidden the inside of the fountain, and then it's like, why'd I bother using this cool shape? So I abandoned that, laid out some non-stick tinfoil, and started making a band of hot glue with drips coming off of it. This also proved pretty finicky to work with and really didn't look that good. Kind of looked creepy as opposed to flowing water. So on a third try, I made some of these Y-shaped, shapes of flowing water and flooding them in with hot glue. These I peeled off, sliced to height, and attached 4 of them around the fountain. This is a bit closer to what would actually happen in real life for a slow-flowing fountain like this, and it allows a clear view underneath to see the fluted shape. And it had been some time since I used this Art and Glow. The one part has turned pretty yellow. I don't know how this is going to turn out. So I mixed that up and did 2 parts brown to 1 part green ink. It's actually not green, it's sort of a bluish green. This will give it that murky, sort of realistic look, because remember, water is not blue. So mixin', and then a high pour to try and get rid of bubbles. There were still a lot of micro bubbles because I had to stir a lot because this stuff, again, is aged and thick. Luckily, I'll spoil the story now, it did cure perfectly hard. It cured flawlessly, but I still think it's at end of life. If I weren't using it for this murky fountain, it's definitely not clear anymore, so there are some use cases where I probably wouldn't bother trying it again. And as you can see, I built a hot glue dam there for this to dry on just in case it does spring a leak. Luckily, it didn't. And for the first 20 minutes or so, I went back every 5 minutes and hit it with a hot air gun. That got rid of all the bubbles, and we got a beautiful finish. Yes, and look at that gorgeous water finish. The color of it is, I think, good that it would fit in a grimy dungeon, but it also wouldn't look terribly out of place in like a town square. Just a good all-purpose fountain. So what are you missing from your collection? And what am I still missing from mine? Feel free to leave comments with suggestions. If you want to support me, the best thing you can do is click subscribe and share the word, but I also have Patreon and Amazon and other money stuff. The links are in the video description below if you want to look at that. In any case, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. I'm Wylock. Make things and play games.